She closed her eyes to die and opened them to find a human holding her. The air around Kalara thrummed with the desperate pulse of the void, the shattered remnants of her guardianship scattering like dust motes across the black. Her ceremonial armor, meant to withstand the crushing pressures of her homeworld's deep ocean cities, was failing against the sheer indifferent vacuum. The sacred chants meant to guide her passage to the ancestral resonance failed her lips, choked by the absence of air. She was heiress of the fathoms, bound by oath to carry the shard of their dying world to the promised new dawn. And she had failed. Shame burned hotter than the icy grip of vacuum. She accepted the end, the long silent fade into nullity, a disgrace to her bloodline, a broken link in the chain. Then a sudden, rough impact, not the brutal tearing she expected, but a contained violence. She was being dragged, pulled against a rough, thick material, something that smelled of ozone and stale sweat, and something else, sharp, metallic. A voice, low and raspy, cut through the roaring in her ears, not the modulated hum of her people, but a chaotic tonal thing, guttural and alien. Gotcha, you big-eyed weirdo. Hold still, damn it. Hands, calloused and surprisingly strong, fumbled at the seals of something rigid clamping around her head. Air, thin and smelling wrong, filled her lungs, making her cough violently, body convulsing against the stranger holding her. He swore under his breath, a string of the alien sounds she didn't understand but instinctively registered as frustration. When her vision cleared, swimming back from the edges of gray, she saw him, a human. They were a myth, whispers in the far-flung trade routes, barbaric, unpredictable. This one was closer than any myth had dared suggest, enclosed in a bulky, stained survival suit. His faceplate was dark, hiding his features. He finished sealing the impromptu helmet around her head, securing it with a series of quick, practiced movements that spoke of desperation and utility. All right, that'll hold for a bit. Had to scavenge it off a dead transport pilot. Little small, sorry. His voice was muffled through the comms in the helmet. He smelled strongly of recycled air and something acrid, like burnt dust. They were crammed into a tiny escape pod, barely large enough for one of him, impossibly containing them both. The pod was battered, emergency lights blinking. The faint hum of life support the only sound beyond their ragged breaths. Her alien physiology, adapted to deep pressure and nutrient paste, protested the sudden shift to low gravity and artificial atmosphere. Her skin, naturally iridescent in its usual environment, felt dull and clammy. "Who? What are you?" she managed, her voice a strained whisper through the comms. He was already working the rudimentary controls, his movements quick and efficient, focused entirely on survival. He spared her a brief glance. The faceplate was clear enough now. His eyes were a pale, indeterminate color, set in a face etched with lines of exhaustion and grim determination. A faint scar traced across his jaw. Name's Jax, and right now, we're two folks in a lifeboat that's seen better days. Headed somewhere. Lost the main ship. You weren't exactly helping the structural integrity floating out there like that. He didn't sound heroic, or even particularly kind. Just tired and pragmatic. Her designation, heiress of the fathoms, felt like a cruel joke in this cramped, smelly box. I am Kalara, of the deep current lineage. The name felt too large, too heavy. For this indignity, she clutched instinctively at the place where the shard of her world, the core of the ancestral resonance, should have been. It was gone, lost in the void. Despair washed over her, cold and absolute. Her people were doomed. She was doomed. And she was stuck with this crude alien who had saved her life without knowing or seemingly caring who she was. "Where are we going?" she asked again, the question heavy with unspoken dread. Jax didn't look away from the flickering nav display. "Wherever this thing takes us. Life support's marginal, power's shot. Comms are fried. Looks like there's a planet. Maybe?" He pointed a thick, gloved finger at a fuzzy green and blue swirl on the screen. "Atmosphere looks breathable. Gravity might be dry manageable. It's our only shot." His pragmatism grated against her ritualistic upbringing, where every action was steeped in meaning and prophecy. There was no prophecy here, only blind chance and the desperate will of a creature utterly alien to her understanding. Her survival was an accident, an inconvenient, deeply humiliating accident. She sank back against the metal wall, the scavenged helmet feeling heavy and wrong, the strange scent of the human filling her limited world. Her shame was a physical weight, anchoring her to the cold floor of the escape pod. She had to find the shard. She had to salvage her mission. But first, she had to survive this human, in this indignity. The escape pod rattled violently as it hit atmosphere. Jax braced himself against the controls, barking clipped instructions she couldn't understand. But his body language, tense and focused, conveyed the danger. Calera, unused to such turbulent motion outside the deep, calm currents of her world, felt a wave of nausea. The scavenged helmet felt even more constricting now, the rough interior scraping against her sensitive facial tendrils. She wished she could shed the suit, feel the subtle currents of the air, read the emotional landscape of this strange human with her skin. But the environment outside was still lethal. "What is happening?" she demanded, the fear tight in her throat. "Rough entry," Jax yelled back, his voice distorted. "Looks like a storm front." "Great. Just great." "Hang on." The pod pitched and rolled, metal groaning in protest. Outside the small viewport, flashes of light illuminated swirling clouds, violent and alien. Kellara had seen storms on her world, but they were measured, predictable movements of water and pressure. This felt like the universe tearing itself apart. She focused on Jax, on his steady, almost defiant posture against the chaos. He wasn't praying or chanting or invoking ancestral aid. He was wrestling the controls, muttering curses, relying only on his own skill and the failing technology. It was a terrifying, yet strangely compelling display of agency. With a final, shuddering impact, they landed. Not smoothly, but a crash that sent the pod tumbling end over end before it came to a rest at an angle, half buried in soft earth. Silence descended, broken only by the dripping of unknown liquids and the continued weak hum of the pod systems. Jax slumped against the console, breathing heavily. He reached up and popped his own helmet seal, pulling it off with a sigh. His face was streaked with dirt and sweat, his pale eyes scanning their surroundings through the cracked viewport. "Wow," he wheezed, "we're alive."
That's something.
Killara waited, listening. Her senses, dulled by the suit and helmet, strained to perceive the new environment.
It felt
Born alive, not with the dense, thrumming life of her ocean cities, but a different kind, subtle and foreign. She tentatively reached for her own helmet seal, following Jax's lead. "Wait," he said, holding up a hand. "Atmosphere check first. Don't want your insides turning into jelly." He fumbled with a device on his wrist. A small, flat thing with a blinking light. He held it outside a small emergency vent. The light turned green. "Okay," he said, his voice softer now. "Looks good. Probably tastes like crap, though." She removed the helmet. The air was humid, thick with the scent of decaying vegetation and something sweet, like unknown flowers. It felt cool against her skin, a shocking relief after the stale recycled air. She drew a deep breath, her tendrils twitching as they absorbed the subtle atmospheric shifts. "It is dense," she observed, the humidity of physical weight. She looked around the cramped pod. "We must exit. We must ascertain our location and the status of my mission." Jax was already working at the jammed hatch. "Hold your horses, princess. Hatch is stuck, and your mission, whatever it is probably on a different star system right now. Focus on step one. Don't die." He braced his shoulder against the hatch, grunting with effort. Kellara watched him, a mixture of impatience and grudging respect swirling within her. His methods were crude, lacking any ritual grace, but they were effective. He was focused on the immediate, the tangible. It was so different from her world, where every action was imbued with layered meaning and historical weight. After several frustrating minutes, the hatch groaned open with a screech of torn metal, revealing a tangle of thick, unfamiliar foliage. The light filtering through the canopy was dappled in green. The air outside was even richer, alive with the chirps and buzzes of unseen creatures. Jax scrambled out first, cautious, weapon raised. A sleek, lethal device she didn't recognize. He surveyed the dense jungle around them. Okay, he muttered, lowering the weapon slightly. Definitely not cancer. He turned back to her, still half inside the pod. All right, come on. Don't have much time before this thing becomes a beacon for whatever lives here. She hesitated. Stepping out of the pod felt like stepping out of everything she knew. But staying insane felt like a different kind of death. With a deep breath, Kalara pushed herself out of the pod and into the alien world. The ground was soft and yielding beneath her feet. Unlike the hard, polished floors of her city, the vegetation pressed in, vibrant and overwhelming. She felt exposed, vulnerable, stripped of her context and purpose. Standing next to the human, surrounded by this chaotic alien life, she felt smaller than she ever had in her life. Her mission felt impossible, her heritage meaningless. All that mattered was the immediate, pressing need to survive. They moved slowly through the dense undergrowth, Jax leading the way, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. He moved with a quiet confidence that spoke of long practice in hostile environments. Kalara followed behind, her senses overwhelmed by the sheer volume of unfamiliar stimuli. The ground shifted beneath her feet, the air pulsed with unseen life, and the canopy above was a tangled, impenetrable ceiling. Every step was a deliberate act, each breath a conscious effort to process the alien world. Her tendrils, usually subtly reading the emotional flows of her environment, were lost in a cacophony of foreign signals. She felt blind, deaf, and utterly dependent on the human. "Stay close," Jax ordered, his voice a low command. "Don't wander off. This place feels wild." He stopped abruptly, raising his weapon. Kalara froze, her body tensing instinctively. He was listening, his head tilted slightly. "Hear that?" he whispered. Kalara strained her senses. A low, rhythmic thrumming, deep in the ground, vibrated through the soles of her feet. It wasn't mechanical. It felt organic and powerful. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Jack slowly lowered his weapon. "Don't know. Doesn't sound aggressive. Just big." He exchanged a look with her, his pale eyes reflecting a flicker of the unknown. In that shared moment of uncertainty, a fragile thread formed between them. Not of trust, but of mutual vulnerability. "Whatever it is, let's not step on it." He resumed moving, more cautiously now, following a barely discernible animal trail. As they traveled deeper into the jungle, Kalara began to notice other things. Strange, glowing fungi clinging to the sides of enormous trees, casting an eerie blue light. The ground was riddled with holes and burrows, hinting at hidden life beneath the surface. The air grew warmer, heavier. They came to a small clearing, dominated by a massive, gnarled tree, with roots that twisted like grappling hooks into the earth. At the base of the tree was an opening, dark and silent. Jack stopped again. "Shelter," he stated, more to himself than to her, and made water? He approached the opening cautiously, testing the ground before entering. Kalara hovered at the edge, hesitant. Subterranean spaces were not her natural element, but the exposed jungle felt dangerous. "Is it safe?" she asked. Jax shrugged. "Safer than out here. Could be anything in there, but it's out of the storm, and it looks dry." He disappeared into the opening, his weapon light cutting a beam through the darkness. After a moment, he called out, "Clear, mostly. Looks like something lived here." She followed him inside. The air was cool and still, smelling of damp earth and something else, something ancient and forgotten. The space opened into a cavern, larger than she expected, the walls covered in intricate carvings that seemed to glow faintly in the beam of Jax's light. The carvings depicted fluid, swirling shapes, reminiscent of deep currents, but alien in their form. Kalara felt a strange resonance from them, a faint echo of power that stirred something deep within her. This was not just a cave. It was a place of significance. Jax, oblivious to the carving's meaning, was focused on more immediate concerns. He found a small trickle of water running down one wall into a shallow basin. He knelt, scooping water into his cupped hands, drinking greedily. "Clean, looks like," he said, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Jackpot," he offered her water, gesturing with his head. Kilara knelt beside him, cupping her own hands. The water was cool and pure, tasting faintly of minerals she didn't recognize. It was the first truly good thing she had experienced since the pod crash. As she drank, she looked at Jax. In the dim light of the cavern, the lines on his face seemed deeper, the weariness more pronounced. He was just a man, stripped of his technology, relying on instinct and basic skills. And yet he had saved her. He was pragmatic, unsentimental, and utterly focused on the next step. He represented everything alien to her world of ritual and tradition. But here, in this raw, untamed place, his way of being felt necessary. She still didn't trust him, not truly, but the shared water felt like a small, tentative bridge between their worlds. "Thank you," she said, surprising herself. Jax just nodded, his gaze still sweeping the cavern, ever vigilant. "Don't thank me yet," he said. "We've got a long way to go." They spent the next few days in the cavern, rationing the meager supplies from the pod, venturing out only to forage for water and attempt to find their bearings. The cavern offered meager protection, but the constant threat of the jungle pressed in from all sides. Kilara found herself studying Jax, trying to understand his rhythms, his motivations. He was guarded, rarely spoke about himself, his past a closed book. His dry humor, initially baffling, began to make sense in the face of their grim reality, a way to deflect, to keep the crushing weight of their situation at bay. He taught her practical things, how to identify edible plants, mostly by observing what local creatures ate, a trial and error process that led to some uncomfortable digestive episodes for both of them. How to build a simple fire using scavenged pod components and dry leaves, how to move silently through the undergrowth. His patience was surprising, bordering on non-existent when she was slow to grasp a concept, but relentless in its application. "You're a quick study," he admitted grudgingly one evening, watching her meticulously arrange leaves for a makeshift bed. "My people learn quickly," she replied, a flicker of pride in her voice. "Our world demands adaptability." She didn't mention the millennia of genetic conditioning, the ingrained instinct for survival in extreme conditions. He just grunted, poking the fire. "Yeah, well, this world's got its own demand." He looked out towards the cave entrance, where the glowing fungi cast shifting shadows. "Still don't like that thrumming. It feels closer." The low vibration was a constant presence now, a deep pulse beneath the earth, that Kalara's tendrils registered as a mix of immense power and dormant energy. It was linked to the ancient carvings on the wall. She was sure of it. The resonance was growing stronger. One night, while Jax slept fitfully near the entrance, Kilara found herself drawn to the carvings. She reached out a hand, letting her tendrils brush against the cool stone. The resonance intensified, a complex pattern of feeling and memory flowing into her. It wasn't telepathy as her people practiced it, the clear transfer of thought and emotion within a bloodline. This was raw, ancient, the imprint of beings who had used this place for a purpose she couldn't yet grasp. Images flickered through her mind, deep, still water, glowing symbols, figures moving with deliberate, ritualistic grace. It was an empathy-based memory merging, a connection to the past woven into the very fabric of the rock. As she absorbed the echoes, a searing pain shot through her. Not physical, but a psychic agony, a memory of violation and betrayal. The swirling forms twisted, becoming sharp and aggressive. The gentle hum of the ancient power turned discordant, corrupted. She recoiled, gasping, stumbling back from the wall. The pain was accompanied by a flash of recognition, a chilling parallel to the betrayal that had led to the destruction of her guardianship and the loss of the ancestral resonance shard. The same cold, calculating intent, the same violation of sacred trust. Jax was instantly awake, his weapon up, eyes narrowed. "What was that?" he demanded. Kilara was trembling, her skin shimmering with distress. "The carvings," she whispered, her voice ragged. They speak of power and of pain. Betrayal." She looked at the corrupted patterns etched into the stone. This place, it was important. It was used. And then, broken. A new sound cut through the night air outside the cavern, a high-pitched, mechanical whine, growing steadily louder. It was not an organic sound. It was technology. Alien technology, but not her people's. Jax's expression hardened. Sounds like company, he said grimly. He moved silently towards the cave entrance, peering out into the darkness. And not friendly company. Kilara's tendrils twitched, feeling the cold, predatory intent emanating from the source of the sound. It was the same feeling she had registered from the attackers who had destroyed her ship. They had found her, and this place, this ancient, resonant cavern, was somehow connected. Her accidental survival with the human had led her not away from her enemies, but potentially right into their corrupted hands. The stakes had just become terrifyingly clear. The mechanical whine grew louder, closer. Jax ducked back into the cavern, pulling Kilara with him into the deeper shadows near the back wall. "They're dropping search drones," he muttered, watching beams of light slice through the foliage outside. "Silent running, thermal and life signs. Smart. And they know what they're looking for." He glanced at her, his gaze sharp. "They're looking for you, aren't they? Whatever your mission was, somebody really doesn't want you to complete it." Kilara pressed herself against the cold rock, her heart pounding. The sense of being hunted, of being exposed and vulnerable, was overwhelming. She felt a chilling certainty that the Ackers were connected to the corrupted power she had sensed in the carvings. They sought to control or destroy the ancient resonance, and her bloodline's connection to it made her a target. "They are connected," she confirmed, her voice low. "To the breaking of this place, to the attack on my ship. They are the corrupted ones." "Corrupted ones," Jax repeated, a hint of dry humor in his tone despite the danger.
Right.
"So your corrupt priests, or whatever chased you across the galaxy, blew up your ride, and now they're here. Great. Just fantastic. What do they want?" "They seek control of the ancestral resonance," Keller explained, struggling to keep her voice steady. "The deep current that flows through certain lineages, connecting us to our world's core and to the ancient power. They believe it should be controlled, weaponized, not guided and preserved." She gestured towards the carvings. "This place amplified the resonance. It was a node. They came here, long ago, and they broke it." Jax listened intently, his earlier sarcasm replaced by grim focus. "Okay, so, you're a walking power battery they want to steal, or shut down. And this cave is a busted charger. Makes a kind of sense." He paused, listening to the drones hovering outside the entrance. "They won't come in here unless they're sure. Too risky. But they'll wait us out, or flush us out." He looked at the deep shadows at the back of the cavern, then back at the carvings near the entrance. "Any chance those carvings tell you how to unbreak this place? Or maybe give you a power-up?" Kilara focused on the carvings again, reaching out with her senses. More cautiously this time. The painful echo was still there, but beneath it she felt the faint pattern of the original purpose, the intended function of the node. "There is a process," she whispered, following the faint lines of energy. "A merging of intent, of resonance." The empathy memories showed figures joining hands, their forms shimmering, their individual pulses synchronizing with the deep thrumming of the earth. It required two, a catalyst and an anchor, to mend the broken flow. Jax frowned. "Two, like you and me." The thought hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken implications. Kilara looked at him, the strange human who had stumbled into her apocalypse. He was an unknown quantity, alien in every way. But he was here, and he had a resonance of his own, a stubborn life force that pulsed steadily despite the chaos surrounding them. He was not of her bloodline, not trained in the ancient ways, but he was present, grounded, an anchor. "Perhaps," she said, the word feeling foreign on her tongue, "if our resonances could be aligned." The drones outside shifted, their whine changing pitch. "They're getting impatient," Jax said, his hand tightening on his weapon. "Looks like our time is running out." He looked from the cave entrance to the carvings, then back to her. "So, this merging thing, is it dangerous? For you? For me?" Kilara met his gaze. "It is. Unknown, with one not of my people," she admitted. "But the alternative is capture, or death, for both of us." The unspoken threat hung between them. Forced proximity had become forced destiny. The ancient ritual, meant for two carefully chosen individuals of her own kind, might now depend on a scarred human and a disgraced heiress, thrown together by chance and pursued by a corrupted power. The decision was stark, brutal in its simplicity. Perform a potentially lethal, culturally forbidden ritual with an alien, or face certain capture and likely a worse fate at the hands of the corrupted ones. Jax, pragmatic to his core, looked at the options. "All right," he said, his voice rough. "Walk me through it, princess. How do we merge our resonances?" Kilara felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her chest. Explaining a ritual steeped in millennia of history and nuanced energetic exchange to a being whose understanding of power likely involved kinetic force and chemical reactions felt impossible. It required connection, she began, choosing the simplest terms. Physical and resonant. The flow of energy must pass between us, guided by intent. My intent, primarily, mend the broken pattern. Your presence, as an anchor, a grounding force. She gestured to the carvings. The process is depicted there. Touch. Synchronization. The alignment of pulse and will. Jax followed her gaze to the carvings. They depicted two figures, their forms intermingling, surrounded by flowing lines of light. It looked less like a technical diagram and more like a dance, or something far more intimate. "Physical, huh?" he said, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. He looked back at her, his gaze lingering on her form, on the subtle shimmering of her skin, the delicate movement of her tendrils, the cramped space of the cavern. The shared danger, the raw intensity of the moment stripped away the layers of cultural alienation, leaving only two beings facing impossible odds. "Yes," Kilara confirmed, feeling a heat rise in her skin that had nothing to do with the humid air. "The resonance flows skin to skin. It is a deep bonding." The term in her language was profound, sacred, usually associated with the most intimate, life-affirming rituals. To perform it now with a stranger, under duress, felt like a violation, even if it was necessary. The whine of the drones outside changed pitch again. Closer now, more probing. "Okay, no time for a biology lesson," Jack said, his voice sharp with urgency. "Just tell me what to do." Step 1. Touch. He held out a hand, palm up. His skin was rough, scarred, so different from the smooth, pressure-adapted skin of her people. It felt alien, foreign, but it was solid. Present. Kilara hesitated for only a fraction of a second. Survival demanded it. Her mission, however shattered, demanded it. And something deeper, a strange pull towards this human who had saved her, urged her forward. She reached out and placed her hand in his. His grip was firm, warm. The contact sent a jolt through her, not just physical, but energetic. His life force was strong, steady, a grounding presence in the chaotic flow of the cavern's ancient energy. "Now," she instructed, her voice low, focusing on the empathy echoes of the ritual. "Close your eyes. Feel the thrumming in the earth. Let your own pulse synchronize with it. Empty your mind of everything but stillness. Be the anchor." She closed her own eyes, focusing her will, reaching out with her resonance, searching for the broken pattern in the cavern's energy flow. She needed to thread her own pulse, her own intent, through the fractured core, using Jax's grounded dredgens as a conduit, a bridge. As their hands remained clasped, Kilara began the silent internal chant of the merging ritual. It was a complex sequence of intent, a tracing of energetic pathways, a weaving of present life into ancient power. She guided her resonance, feeling it flow from her core, through her hand into Jax's, seeking his own pulse, asking it to align, to synchronize. For a moment there was only his raw, chaotic life force, resisting the subtle guidance. Then she felt a shift, a faint yielding, a slow, deliberate synchronization. His pulse began to match the ancient thrumming of the earth, mediated through her own rhythm. The air in the cavern grew thick, heavy with energy. The carvings on the wall began to glow brighter, pulses of light matching the synchronized beat of their combined resonances. The pain she had felt earlier intensified, the echo of the breaking, but beneath it, the original pattern was reasserting itself, guided by her will and anchored by his presence. It required intense focus, drawing on reserves of power she hadn't known she possessed. The strain was immense, threatening to tear her apart. Then she felt it, a surge of power, raw and untamed, flowing from the depths of the earth, up through the cavern, through their joined hands and into her. It was the ancient resonance, unfiltered, immense. It overwhelmed her senses, flooding her with sensations both terrifying and exhilarating. And intertwined with it, she felt Jax's own resonance, not as a separate entity, but as a complementary force, grounding the wild power, giving it direction. His presence was more than just an anchor. It was a necessary component, transforming the raw energy into something usable, something capable of mending the broken flow. In that moment of intense, energetic merging, the boundaries between them blurred. She felt not just his pulse, but the quiet steadiness of his will, the deep reservoir of resilience, forged in hardship. She felt the echoes of his own pain, his own losses, held tightly beneath the surface. He felt vast, like a deep, still ocean capable of absorbing any shock. And she knew, with a certainty that resonated deeper than any bloodline oath, that he was exactly what was needed, a human anchor for an alien power. The merging was complete. The broken pattern began to knit itself together, the cavern pulsing with a steady, mended light. As the surge of power subsided, leaving her trembling and exhausted but strangely exhilarated, Kilara opened her eyes. Jax was staring at her, his own eyes wide, reflecting the residual glow of the carvings. His hand was still clasped in hers, his grip firm. What was that? He breathed, his voice hoarse. The merging, she whispered, feeling the deep thrumming of the mended node through her body. It is done. The air still crackled with latent energy, but the agonizing echo of the breaking was gone, replaced by the steady hum of restored power. Outside, the whine of the drones cut out abruptly. A distant explosion echoed through the jungle. Jax's head snapped towards the sound. What the hell? The node is active again, Kilara explained, her mind still processing the magnitude of the experience. It was broken to prevent its power from being used. Now that it is mended, it is disrupting their detection. Protecting this place, the corrupted ones relied on technological means to sense and track the resonance. An active node, pulsing with its true power, was a disruptive force to their control. Jax looked at his hand still linked with hers, then back at her face, his expression unreadable. We fixed it? With our hands? He shook his head, a hint of his usual dry humor returning, albeit shaky. Figures. Blow up half my ship, drag me through a jungle, and then we fix a magical power source with a handshake. He finally released her hand, though the energetic connection, the faint echo of the merge, lingered like a phantom touch. The immediate threat had receded, the drones silenced, but the deeper conflict remained. They had mended the node, but they were still stranded, pursued by a powerful enemy. More importantly, the merging ritual had irrevocably changed things between them. It was more than just shared survival. It was a physical and energetic bond, something profound and potentially dangerous within the context of Kilara's culture. She looked at Jax, seeing him now not just as a crude alien rescuer, but as the anchor, the other half of the completed ritual. The implications were vast and unsettling. What did this merging mean according to her people's strict ritualistic laws? What obligation did it create? We are bound, she said, stating the fact that resonated through her very being. By the merging, by the mending of the node. Jax ran a hand through his sweat-soaked hair. Bound? Like paperwork or something more? Alien? He seemed wary, unsure how to interpret the intensity in her gaze, the subtle shift in her demeanor. Kilara looked down at her hands, seeing the faint residual glow on her skin. In my culture, such a merging is, though sacred, it creates an obligation, a bond mark, not of ink, but of shared resonance. It is usually performed only once in a lifetime, with one's chosen partner. The word felt inadequate, too small for the vastness of what they had just experienced. Partner implied equality, choice. This was forced, desperate, yet undeniably deep. Jax's expression shifted from weary pragmatism to something akin to alarm. Partner? Hold on, princess. We zapped ourselves with ancient power to shake off the bad guys. That doesn't mean. He trailed off, looking at her again, really looking. He saw the sincerity in her eyes, the weight of her cultural context bearing down on her. It doesn't work like that for my people, he finished, his voice softer now, a hint of uncertainty creeping in. We don't geeks bound by chance encounters or emergency procedures. Your culture is different, Kilara stated simply. But the resonance is real. The wrenching occurred. It carries weight. She didn't know the full implications herself. The ritual was ancient, rarely performed. Its specifics often shrouded in mystery even to the Harris lineage. But she knew its fundamental purpose, to create an unbreakable bond between those chosen to wield or guide immense power. And they had just wielded it, together. A new thrumming began. Not the deep pulse of the earth, but a lighter vibration in the air. It was approaching rapidly, a different sound from the drones, more powerful, more controlled. Another ship? Jax asked, his hand going instinctively to his weapon. Kilara extended her senses, reading the subtle energy signature of the approaching craft. It was not the chaotic, corrupted energy of their pursuers. This felt older, purer, a faint echo of the resonance she carried, of the mended node. No, she breathed, hope flickering unexpectedly in her chest. It is of my people, or those allied with my lineage. The activation of the node must have sent a signal, a pulse of pure resonance across the void, guiding those who understood its language. They had been found, not by their enemies, but by potential allies. Or perhaps, the custodians of the very laws she might have just inadvertently broken. The ship landed gently a short distance from the cavern entrance, the sound of its engines a soft hum compared to the violence of their crash. Silhouetted against the jungle light, figures emerged, tall and graceful, their forms radiating a calm, disciplined energy. They were armed, but their posture was one of assessment, not aggression. Jax kept his weapon ready, wary. Kilara stood straighter, pulling on the tattered remnants of her dignity. She was heiress of the Fathoms, despite her current state, and she had a bond to explain. One of the figures, clearly a leader, stepped forward. Their forms shimmered subtly, their movements fluid and precise. They spoke, their voice a modulated hum that resonated familiar to Kilara's ears. Heiress Kilara, we sensed the node's activation, and a dual resonance signature. Unanticipated, their gaze shifted to Jax. Assessing him, their expression unreadable. Who is this companion? Kilara stepped forward, placing a hand on Jax's arm, a possessive, protective gesture she hadn't consciously intended. He is Jax, she stated, her voice clear and steady. He saved my life, and he was the anchor for the merging, to mend the node. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication for her people. The leader's shimmer intensified slightly, a sign of surprise or perturbation. The merging, the leader repeated, their hum deepening with gravity. With a non-resonant one, heiress the implications of such a bond, unintended or not, profound. Their gaze swept between Kilara and Jax, assessing the undeniable connection that pulsed faintly between them, a residual echo of the ritual. You understand what this means? According to the ancient laws, Kilara met the leader's gaze, her resolve hardening. The fear she had felt earlier was replaced by a strange sense of certainty. Jax, the pragmatic human, was her anchor. He had helped her mend the node, inadvertently stepping into a sacred ritual meant for her people alone. He was bound to her now, by resonance and by circumstance, and whatever the ancient laws demanded, she would waste it with him. I understand, she said, her voice strong. He is my bondmate, by resonance, by fate. The leader's shimmer intensified, a ripple of controlled shock, passing through the group of aliens. Jax stiffened beside her, his eyes wide behind the cracked faceplate, clearly understanding that Kilara had just claimed him in a way he hadn't anticipated. The dry humor was gone, replaced by raw confusion and disbelief. Their shared survival had led them to a place of unexpected, life-altering consequence. The alien leader, whose designation was first speaker, regarded Kalara with an expression that was a complex mix of relief at finding the Heiress alive and profound disquiet over her declaration. "Here's Kalara," their voice hummed, carefully neutral. "The merging ritual, especially one that successfully reactivates a node, carries the highest form of bond. It is unbreakable, and it is traditionally performed with one deemed resonant worthy from a sanctioned lineage." Their gaze flicked to Jax. "This possesses no familiar resonant signature. He is resonant worthy," Kalara insisted, tightening her grip on Jax's arm. She felt his muscles tense under her touch, a silent testament to his unease. He anchored the ritual. Without him, the node could not have been mended. His presence was the key. She didn't fully understand why, not in the terms of her people's science or ritual. She only knew the truth of the energy flow, the perfect, grounding stillness Jax had provided in the eye of the power surge. First speaker turned their attention to Jax. "Human," they addressed him directly. "Do you comprehend the Heiress's declaration? The bond she speaks of is not merely symbolic. It is a merging of life currents recognized by the ancestral resonance itself. It means partnership for all of life, in all things." Jax finally spoke, his voice rough. "Look, with all due respect, speaker, sir or madam or whatever, I just crash-landed, fought off killer drones, and got zapped by a glowing cave. I appreciate the rescue, but I'm not looking for ever or all things. I just want to get back to my corner of the galaxy and forget this ever happened." He looked at Kalara, his confusion evident. "No offense, princess. You saved my hide too back in that pod. But this bond thing, it wasn't exactly in the user manual." Kalara felt a sharp pang at his words, a cold splash of reality against the profound connection she had felt during the merging. To her, the ritual's completion, the sheer power of the moment, had created an undeniable truth. To him, it was a side effect, an inconvenient consequence of survival. "It is the law," she stated, her voice flat. "The ancient law. The bond mark is given by the resonance itself. It cannot be denied." "Laws can be interpreted," first speaker interjected, their tone suggesting political maneuverings Kalara was too steeped in ritual to fully grasp. "A merging with a non-resonant is unprecedented. There will be debate among the council, among the lineages, especially considering the circumstances of your return." The mention of the council and her return brought a fresh wave of dread. Her failure to deliver the original charge, the loss of her ship, the accusation of corruption against her attackers, all of it would be scrutinized. And now, this bond with a human, it was a complication of unimaginable magnitude. "The corrupted ones still seek the resonance," Kalara reminded them, shifting the focus back to the external threat. "They are capable of attacking even allied ships. We must return quickly and secure the mended node." First speaker inclined their head. "That is acknowledged. Your vessel, the Deep Currents Whisper, was attacked and lost. We mourn the crew. Your survival and the node's activation are the only mercies in this tragedy. You will accompany us to the Sanctum City. The node's energy signature is now linked to our network. We will fortify this location." They looked at Jax again. "The human will accompany you. For now, his status and the nature of this bond will be determined by the council." Jax looked between first speaker and Kalara, his face a study in reluctant acceptance. He was trapped, his desire for a quiet exit, thwarted by ancient alien laws and political intrigue. "Figures," he muttered, just loud enough for Kalara to hear. "Save the princess. Got stuck with the crown jewels." Despite the dry humor, Kalara saw the subtle tension in his jaw, the weariness in his eyes. He wasn't happy about this. Not one bit. But he wasn't fighting it either. Not yet. As they walked towards the waiting ship, leaving the pulsing, mended cavern behind, Kalara kept her hand resting lightly on Jax's arm. The physical touch was a reassurance to herself, as much as a gesture of solidarity. She was returning in disgrace. Her mission failed, her lineage exposed to attack. But she was not returning alone. She was returning with a human anchor, a living, breathing paradox, who had become irrevocably linked to her fate. The journey back would be fraught with challenges, cultural clashes, and the ever-present threat of the corrupted ones. But for the first time since her ship was destroyed, Kelleher felt a fragile spark of hope. She had lost a world shard, but perhaps, just perhaps, she had found something else entirely. The Sanctum City was a marvel of bioluminescent architecture and engineered deep-water currents, shimmering and pulsing with light beneath the waves. Kelleher had grown up within its graceful structures, but returning now felt alienating. The air was thick with unspoken judgment, the gazes of her people lingering on the human by her side. Jax, stripped of his survival gear and outfitted in borrowed, ill-fitting alien clothing that shimmered in response to his internal temperature, was a stark contrast to the fluid grace of the deep current lineage. His presence caused ripples of unease wherever they went. They were housed in a temporary dwelling, comfortable but clearly meant for observation, not privacy. Council members, their forms layered with symbols of status and lineage, came and went, questioning Kelleher for hours about the attack, the node, and most intensely, the circumstances of the merger. They treated Jax with cautious distance, as a variable, an anomaly to be studied and contained. He remained stoic through it all, answering their precise, formal questions with his usual blunt honesty and occasional bursts of baffling human idiom. "So, you're saying you didn't initiate the ritual?" Eris, a council member designated Flowing Wisdom, hummed, their shimmer intensifying with suspicion. "It was a byproduct of survival. It was necessary to mend the node and escape the corrupted ones," Kelleher explained for the 10th time, weariness coloring her voice. "The human provided the grounding force required when the pattern was fractured." "And the bond mark?" Another council member, deep memory pressed. "The resonant link? Did you feel it form?" "The joining of life currents." Kelleher glanced at Jax, who was watching the exchange with a carefully neutral expression. The faint energetic connection was still there, a subtle awareness of his presence, his mood, even across a short distance. It was not the full empathy of her own kind, but a unique two-way channel that had formed during the merge. "Yes," she confirmed quietly. "It is present." When the council members finally left, the silence in the dwelling was heavy. Jax sank onto a cushioned surface, running a hand over his face. "Man, your council sure knows how to ask a lot of questions that feel like accusations." He looked at her. "Bond mark, life currents, partner, for all of life?" He shook his head. "You weren't kidding, were you? This serious?" Kelleher moved closer to him, sitting on the edge of the cushion. "It is the most serious bond in my culture, Jax." She hesitated, then confessed softly, "I do not fully understand it myself. The ritual is ancient, rarely performed. It was meant for forging deep alliances, not for accidental survival." He was quiet for a long moment, absorbing the weight of her words. "So, what happens now?" he asked, his voice low. "They will debate," Kelleher replied, looking out at the luminous cityscape. "They will consult the ancient texts, the resonance weavers. They will try to interpret how the law applies to—" She gestured between them. "Some will see you as a threat, a contaminant to the blood. Others may see this as a sign. A new path. A new path where the alien princess is stuck with the grunt human," Jax said, a flicker of his dry humor returning, though it was tinged with genuine concern. "Sounds like a raw deal for you." "It is unprecedented," Kelleher acknowledged. She looked at him, at the weary honesty in his eyes. "You saved my life. You helped me mend the node. You faced the corrupted ones with me. You are not a contaminant, Jax." He met her gaze, and for the first time she saw a vulnerability in him, a crack in the pragmatic facade. "Doesn't matter what you think, princess," he said softly. "It's what they and what their laws say." He sighed. "So are we expected to act like this bond is real? Like, are there rules? Hand-holding? Matching outfits? What's the protocol here?" Kelleher almost smiled. His complete lack of understanding, his focus on the trivial aspects of partnership, while ignoring the profound energetic reality, was both frustrating and oddly endearing. "The protocol is complex," she admitted. "It involves mutual support, shared counsel, joining of resources, and deep intimacy." She felt a blush rise to her skin, the shimmer turning a delicate shade of violet. Jax's eyes widened slightly. Intimacy. The bond is rooted in the joining of life currents, Kilara explained, her voice barely above a whisper. To maintain the resonance, to deepen the connection, physical intimacy is required. It is a sacred act within a true bond. The council hadn't asked about this specifically, focusing on the ritual itself, but it was an inherent part of the bond's function. He looked at her, and the confusion in his eyes was replaced by a different emotion, something she couldn't quite read with her limited empathic ability towards him, but which felt potent and complex. The air between them thickened with unspoken tension. The ancient ritual, the shared danger, the undeniable physical attraction that had been simmering beneath the surface of their forced proximity, all coalesced in that moment. They were bound by law and energy, facing a future dictated by ancient custom and external threat. And suddenly, the reality of that bond, with all its complexities and demands, felt overwhelmingly real. The days in the Sanctum City were a blur of interrogations, medical assessments of the bond mark, which Kilara could feel as a subtle pulse near her own energy core, mirrored in Jax, and tense meetings with various council members. Jax remained outwardly calm, his dry wit a shield against the cultural pressure, but Kilara could sense his growing impatience and frustration beneath the surface. His pragmatic nature chafed against the slow, deliberate pace of alien bureaucracy and ritual interpretation. One evening, after a particularly grueling session with a group of particularly stern resonant weavers, Jax found Kilara alone in their dwelling, staring out at the luminous city. "Rough day?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. "They speak of consequences," Kilara replied, turning from the view. For my lineage. For you." The corrupted ones were still a threat, but her bond with a human was creating a different kind of crisis within her own society. "What kind of consequences?" he pressed, moving closer. "Exile, perhaps," she admitted, the word heavy with dread. "If the council deems the bond impure, a forced severance of the link, though the weavers believe that would be detrimental to both of us. Painful, perhaps lethal." Jack stopped in front of her, his expression grim. "Lethal? For trying to save your life? That messed up, princess." He ran a hand over his face. "Look, I don't understand all this bond stuff. The life currents, the resonance. It's outside anything I've ever known. But I don't want you hurt because of me, or you hurt because of their damn law." Kilara met his gaze, seeing the genuine concern in his eyes. It touched her deeply. He was a stranger, an alien from a world away, yet he was worried about her fate, willing to defy the complex web of her society's laws for her. "Nor do I wish for you to be harmed," she said quietly. "You are my anchor, Jax. The bond. It is a part of me now." He reached out tentatively, lifting a hand as if to touch her face, then stopping, his fingers hovering just inches from her skin. The subtle shimmer of her skin seemed to respond to his closeness. "This intimacy thing you mentioned," he said, his voice low, hesitant. Would it help solidify the bond, make it undeniable to them?" Kilara's heart hammered against her ribs. The topic, so clinical when discussed with the council, felt overwhelmingly personal now, standing here with him in the quiet of their temporary dwelling. The cultural taboo of discussing such things openly warred with the stark reality of their situation. "The physical merging deepens the resonant link," she confirmed, her voice barely audible. "It is how the bond is affirmed and strengthened." She looked at him, at the question in his eyes, the uncertainty mixed with something else, something that mirrored the potent, unspoken tension that had pulsed between them in the cavern. This was not the cold, ritualistic act described in ancient texts. This was a choice, born of shared survival and desperate hope, tinged with a fear of the unknown. He finally closed the distance, his fingers gently touching her cheek. His skin was warm, rough, so different from her own, yet the contact sent a familiar jolt through her, the echo of the merging amplified by his touch. His gaze held hers, searching, asking. She leaned into his touch, a silent answer. In the face of cultural judgment, political danger, and an uncertain future, the intimacy she had spoken of was no longer just a ritual obligation. It was a refuge, a way to ground themselves in the undeniable reality of their connection. In a world trying to tear them apart, His hand cupped her cheek, thumb stroking softly across her skin. Kilara closed her eyes for a moment, letting herself feel the warmth of his touch, the quiet strength emanating from him. It was different from the overwhelming flood of energy during the node merging, but it was potent in its own way, a steady, grounding presence in the midst of chaos. She opened her eyes and met his gaze. The uncertainty was still there, but beneath it she saw a flicker of something raw and undeniable, recognition perhaps, of a connection forged in fire and vacuum. "Is this?" Jax began, his voice low and slightly rough. "Is this what the ritual means? Connection?" He wasn't asking about laws or definitions anymore. He was asking about the feeling, the undeniable pull that had existed between them since the moment he had pulled her from the void. "Partially," Kilara whispered, her tendrils twitching with emotion. "The ritual provides the framework, the conduit. But the connection, that is something else, something shared." It was the resilience in him, the unexpected tenderness beneath the pragmatism, that drew her. It was the way he saw her not just as an heiress or a symbol, but as someone who had been afraid, who had failed and who had fought to survive. He leaned closer, his gaze dropping to her lips. The air thickened, electric with unspoken desire and the weight of cultural taboo. This was not a ritual obligation. This was a choice, a defiance of the external pressures that sought to define and contain them. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, a silent question hanging in the air. Kilara offered no answer in words, only tilting her head slightly, a silent invitation. Then his lips were on hers. The kiss was tentative at first, exploring, a hesitant mingling of two utterly alien life forms. His mouth was soft, warm, tasting faintly of the strange food they had been served. Kilara responded instinctively, a deep, primal need rising within her that had nothing to do with ancient rituals and everything to do with being alive, with finding solace and connection in the arms of the one being who had shared her deepest moment of despair and triumph. The subtle shimmer of her skin intensified, pulsing with a surge of emotion. The kiss deepened, shedding its tentative nature. It became desperate, hungry, a mutual acknowledgement of the undeniable pull that had brought them together. Hands tangled in clothing, searching, exploring the unfamiliar contours of alien forms, the whispered words of the council, the drone of the resonant weavers, the looming threat of the corrupted ones, all faded into the background, replaced by the urgent reality of touch, of breath mingling, of two different life currents finding a chaotic, passionate harmony. They moved together, guided by instinct rather than custom, seeking refuge in the physical intimacy that was both a required part of the bond and a fiercely personal act of defiance. The cultural differences melted away in the fire of shared need. He was rough edges and solid strength. She was fluid grace and unexpected intensity. Their bodies learned each other's language, a dialogue of touch and sensation that transcended words. Later, lying tangled together in the soft alien bedding, the faint glow of the city filtering through the viewport, the silence was different. It was not heavy with unspoken fear, but quiet with the aftermath of intense connection. Jax held her close, his breathing steady against her. The subtle pulse of the bond mark, the energetic link between them, felt stronger now, warmer. The intimacy had indeed deepened the connection, weaving their life currents together in a way that felt both profound and terrifying. He stirred, pulling her closer. "Kilara," he murmured, his voice thick with sleep and emotion. It was the first time he had used her name alone, without the formal heiress or the familiar princess. "Jax," she replied, the sound of his name feeling natural on her tongue. She pressed her face against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. It was the most alien sound in the universe, yet it felt like home. He kissed the top of her head. "This is real, isn't it? The bond. It's not just their laws." "No," she confirmed softly. "It is real. You feel it too?" He nodded, his hand stroking her back. "Feels like I'm part of something bigger than myself, and smaller, all at once." He sighed, a long, shaky breath. "So, what does this mean now, for us? With the council and everything?" Kilara pulled back slightly to look at him, tracing the line of his scar with her finger. "It means we face them together. The bond is affirmed. They cannot deny its existence now. but they can still try to interpret its meaning, to control us. She thought of the corrupted ones still out there, still seeking the resonance. Their internal struggle was far from over, and the external threat loomed large. But we are stronger now, she added, more to herself than to him. Bound together, we have faced death and ritual. We can face the council and the corrupted ones. The future was uncertain, fraught with danger and cultural conflict. But for the first time, Kalara felt a fierce, protective loyalty, not just to her lineage, but to the human beside her, her unlikely, impossible bondmate. The council convened, their chambers deep within the sanctum city, resonating with the concentrated power of the ancestral resonance. Kalara stood before them with Jax silent and steady by her side. The air was thick with tension, the shimmer of the council members radiating a mix of curiosity, skepticism, and disapproval. They had heard the reports of the mended node, seen the data on the dual resonance signature, and been informed, discreetly, of the undeniable deepening of the bond mark. First speaker addressed Kalara, their voice formal and resonant. Eris Kalara, you assert this human is your bondmate, despite his lack of resonant lineage and the unconventional circumstances of the merging ritual. He is, Kalara affirmed, her voice clear and unwavering. She felt Jax shift slightly beside her, his silent presence a profound source of strength. The bond pulsed between them, a quiet defiance of the rigid customs of her people. The resonance chose its anchor. My intent guided the mending, but his presence grounded the power. The bond formed then. It was affirmed subsequently. She met their gazes, challenging them to deny the reality of the energy that now flowed between herself and the human. A council member, Stoneheart, hummed with clear disapproval. A human as an anchor? It is unprecedented. A contamination. Jax stepped forward, his posture relaxed but alert. Contamination, huh? He said, his voice low and steady, cutting through the hum of alien speech. Look, I don't know about your fancy powers apps and life currents. All I know is, the heiress was dying, her ship was scrap, and something was trying to kill her. I pulled her out, kept her alive. She figured out how to fix that glowing cave thing, and somehow saving both our asses tied us together. If that's contamination, maybe you need a different word for survival. His blunt assessment, devoid of ritual language or cultural nuance, seemed to momentarily stun the council. First speaker recovered first. Survival is a base instinct. Human. The bond is sacred. It carries obligation, duty, and lineage. Duty? Jax countered, a spark of indignation in his eyes. She already lost everything trying to do her duty. She was out there alone, carrying whatever important gizmo you gave her, with no backup. Where were you? Hiding in your fancy city, debating traditions while the corrupted ones were hunting her. The dry humor was gone, replaced by a fierce, protective anger that was both terrifying and strangely beautiful to Keller. He was defending her, not as a symbol of her lineage, but as a person. His words, blunt and accusatory, struck a nerve. The council members shifted, their shimmer flickering with irritation and discomfort. He had exposed a truth they preferred to ignore. Their failure to protect the heiress, their reliance on outdated rituals instead of proactive defense. First speaker's hum deepened. The human's insolence is disruptive. His status is clearly not that of a sanctioned bondmate. The bond must be dissolved. No, Kalara said, stepping forward again, placing her hand on Jax's arm. The bond cannot be dissolved without great harm. The resonance weavers themselves have confirmed its strength. He is my anchor, my partner in the mended node. She looked at the council, her voice filled with quiet determination. The corrupted ones sought to break the node, to prevent the flow of pure resonance. They feared its power. Perhaps this bond, this unprecedented link between our peoples, is not a weakness. Perhaps it is a new strength, a way to fight the corruption they represent. She spoke of the ancient prophecy of a time when the resonance would face its greatest threat, and a new current would rise to meet it. She argued that Jax, the non-resonant anchor, was that new current, a necessary element ormaged in the crucible of crisis. The council listened, their initial dismissal tempered by the logic of her argument and the undeniable evidence of the mended node's activation. The debate was long and arduous, stretching across cycles of the city's artificial light. In the end, a fragile compromise was reached. The bond would not be dissolved. It was a reality acknowledged by the residents itself. However, its meaning and their status would be conditional. Jax would remain with Kalara, bound to her by the ritual and the cultural decree. They would be assigned a new mission, to seek out other broken nodes across the galaxy, using their unique bond to mend them, building a network of pure resonance to counter the corrupted ones. This mission would serve as their test, their penance and their purpose. Their bond would be under constant scrutiny, its success or failure determining their future, and perhaps the future of Kalara's lineage. As they left the council chambers, walking through the luminous corridors, Kalara felt both relief and apprehension. They had survived the immediate judgment, but the path ahead was long and uncertain. Jax walked beside her, his posture still wary, but his hand rested lightly on her arm, a silent acknowledgement of their shared fate. "So," he said finally, the dry humor back in his voice, though underscored with weariness, "looks like I'm stuck with the princess and a galaxy-wide repair job. Figures." He looked at her, a small, genuine smile touching his lips. "At least I won't be bored." Kalara smiled back, a profound sense of connection blooming in her chest. The bond was real. The future was uncertain. They were two beings from different worlds, bound together by chance, ritual, and the undeniable pull of something far deeper. They were a new current, flowing together into the vast, unknown future, ready to face whatever came next, together.